We're going to talk about mediation, impasse breaking. A lot of situations occur in mediation that cause the parties to stall or come to a screeching halt, and neither side wants to negotiate. This is where your job comes into play, helping these people think brainstorming is an alternative. Understanding that if they go to court, then what's going to happen to them is someone else is going to make a decision for them. A disinterested party like a judge. He's going to listen to both sides. He's going to say one side wins or one side loses. And that's going to be the end of it. You can appeal that case. But again, you go through a tremendous amount of expenditure, time, frustration, hostility with the situation. It's just not a good environment to be in. Litigation is not fun. So if you can mitigate that as much as possible, mediation is the best alternative for you. But mediation comes to these situations where there's an impasse. An example is, this was a case that was in San Antonio, and it was regarding a $20 million personal abduction case where a young girl was abducted off an apartment complex. And the attorney started off by saying right off the bat, here's how the mediation started. After I did my opening, I asked if the demand or offer had been made. And the plaintiff jumps up and he says, I want $1 million. And the defense side, which was Fulbright & Jaworski, which is a fairly sizable firm and had 6 attorneys on their side, started laughing hysterically. I broke them into a caucus and I said, excuse me, what is so funny about a $1 million settlement? He said, the guy's really not too smart. We were expecting to pay him between $3 to $4 million because we had a $20 million umbrella policy that apparently he wasn't aware of. So we're going to settle this today. So we went back into the mediation, and as we're going along, we start off $1 million, and by the time it gets to about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, he's come down to $500,000. So the plaintiff demands to me, he goes, JR, I want you to write this on your notepad, $500,000. That's my bottom line. And I said, okay. So he goes, you underline that. So I underlined it. I held it up to him and I said, really, what is this? He goes, that's my bottom line. My bottom line is, if we don't get $500,000, we're going to go to trial and we're going to clean their clocks. And I said, okay, let me understand this. So I repeated to him, $500,000 or the mediation's over and we all go home. Is that correct? Yes. I don't want to go to trial if they don't give me $500,000. So I sat there and waited for a minute, and I turned to him and I said, listen, Bob, I got a question to ask you. So if I go next door and Fulbright & Jaworski says, hey, we're going to give him $495,000. We thought about it, and that's a fair amount. So I'm going to come to you, and I'm going to say the mediation's over, let's all go home. And he looked at me like, well, why would you do that? And I said, Bob, I'm perfectly clear what you said, $500,000. If you don't get $500,000, we go home. $495,000 isn't $500,000. So I'm just going to send you all home. And he just looked at me like a deer in a headlight look and said, here's how it's going to play out. You're going to sit here and we're going to negotiate until we either come up with one of two things. We all will be in agreement on a settlement amount, or we're all going to be in agreement on an impasse. But we're all going to be in agreement. Not one person making that decision over the others. Do you got me? Do you understand this? And he looked at me and he goes, okay. Well, the case ended up settling for $175,000. Far cry from the $3 to $4 million the plaintiffs or the defendants were willing to pay. And this is a situation where he who speaks first loses. And that's why impasse breaking is so difficult. You have to work hard at it, and you have to make these people realize that if they just decide to throw the whole mediation day away because of pride, ego, arrogance, whatever you want to call it, then they've wasted everything. And they've run a chance for them to settle. It's imperative that when you get to an impasse situation, you work diligently hard to make them think outside the box, to make them think that there is another issue there, to think that there is another avenue of opportunity. Not just to go down the road and stop and go to trial. The cost of going to trial is excessive, time-consuming, and just a pain in the neck. Frustrating to all parties except the attorneys. So what we want to try and do as mediators is to work towards settling the cases so that there is not this disruption. that there's this constant flow of information back and forth. And that if a stepping stone comes into place, that you work around it. Help them establish other alternatives.